The nominees for Best Live Action Short are Gary McKendry, Ashvin Kumar, Macho Vigalondo, Two Cars, One Night, Taika Waititi and Ainsley Gardner.
Taika Waititi's rise has been astonishing to watch. I mean, almost overnight, he went from being a slightly obscure indie New Zealand filmmaker to one of the biggest names in Hollywood. Now, with one of the best Marvel films and an Oscar behind him, he's attached to a Star Wars feature film after directing the outstanding season finale of The Mandalorian. It's great to see Taika reach these levels of success, but what is really exciting is that he has done so while maintaining his own unique style and voice. I mean, Thor Ragnarok works as a Marvel film, but it's also very clearly a Taika Waititi movie.
I tried to start a revolution but didn't print enough pamphlets, so hardly anyone turned up.
But what exactly is a Taika Waititi movie? His movies are too funny to be dramas, but they're not comedies, at least not in the Monty Python or Jim Carrey sort of sense. So what are they? Well, I rewatched his filmography to try and answer this question, and I found that one thing is consistent across his work. I'll let him explain himself.
So, so if you look at a lot of my films, a lot of the time it's not full of jokes. There's like big, you might have 10, 15 minutes of the film where nothing funny happens. Yeah, I found my voice was a mixture of those two, trying to find a balance between that comedy and that drama.
If you've watched a Taika Waititi film, I think you'll know what he means. You'll know that his work often deals with complex issues with surprising nuance and sensitivity, but always in a light-hearted manner. So let's take a look at how Taika Waititi strikes this balance between comedy and drama, and how he finds humour in darkness. Waititi was not always a filmmaker, and has spoken about how he struggled to find his creative niche. He did stand-up comedy with Jermaine Clement, and the two of them continued to work together, including on early versions of Flight of the Conchords. Clement pursued that in music, while Waititi made short films for small New Zealand competitions. One of these short films, Two Cars, One Night, was picked up by some film festivals and was even nominated for an Oscar. It began Waititi's filmmaking career, and gives us our first insight into Waititi's art of balancing humour with serious themes. The story focuses on three children waiting outside a pub in rural New Zealand. In the first minute, we are introduced to three distinct characters: the hot-headed boy, the scrappy girl, and the quiet younger brother. Their first lines tell us everything we need to know about who they are. Of course, this being Taika, these introductions are all funny.
Hey, ugly! Oi, ugly! Hey, girl! Hey, ugly girl!
Humour is the most effective way for writers to get the audience to quickly like a new character, and Taika is the master of this. If a character makes us laugh, then usually we like the character, which means we care about what happens to them, which means that the dramatic story elements then have more weight. It's writing 101, but that's because it works. This is why audiences connect with douchebag characters like Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network, because they make the audience laugh with them.
I believe I deserve some recognition from this board.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
I don't understand.
Which part?
The opening scene of all of Taika's movies firmly focus on the main character introducing themselves to the audience, usually directly through some form of voiceover or narration. These introductions will usually be accompanied by a fast-paced, Edgar Wright-style montage which brings in secondary characters and often the wider world.
He has some pretty old ideas about things.
We should get some slaves.
Yes.
I mean, take the opening of Boy, which not only sets up the key characters, but it establishes Boy's idolization of his father, the undermining of which is the entire premise of the film. Hunt for the Wilderpeople is another example. In the first scene, we are introduced to the main character, the antagonist, and the supporting characters, and in this scene, the main character doesn't even speak. So right from the start of his films, Taika is putting the characters front and center. By quickly and comedically establishing his characters, Taika's films then have the room to explore their deeper themes. But how do you do this while still keeping the film light? Well, this is where Taika's unique style of comedy begins to shine through. New Zealand humour is often described as deadpan, and it doesn't always translate to foreign audiences. I mean, even New Zealanders found eagle vs shark tough going. But I think Taika, especially in his later films, found the right formula for making the deadpan work, by finding the absurd in the serious.
What I find funny are things where Hulk and Thor would be sitting on a bed after having an argument and talking about feelings. When you see how ridiculous these, or over the top these characters are, and then have them talking about stuff that we all talk about. You know, it's more the you know, what we call a comedy of the mundane.
Now, Thor obviously takes this concept to the extreme, but quite often Taika's main characters are completely over-the-top people in quite ordinary situations. Jermaine Clement's character in Eagle vs. Shark is a prime example of this. In his mind, he is a noble warrior on a quest for vengeance, but of course he's just this socially awkward guy living his life. But under Taika's direction, Clement plays it so seriously and so straight that we almost buy into his worldview, only to be constantly reminded how wrong he is.
Okay, you want to leave a message for him?
Could you tell him that justice is waiting for him?
He's waiting for you. Okay, Justin, thank you. Bye-bye.
No justice.
This concept of the comedy of the mundane is the whole premise of what we do in the shadows. We see these mythical, supernatural vampires and all of the lore associated with them, but then it turns out they're just living their boring, everyday lives.
Just leave me to do my dark bidding on the internet.
What are you bidding on?
I'm bidding on a table.
Putting the extraordinary alongside the mundane is central to Taika's style of humour, but it also allows him to handle more complex, real-world themes. The whole time his movies tell us not to sweat the small stuff, so it can give the serious issues the attention they deserve. But can a film deal with serious issues if the film itself is not serious? Well, this brings us to the next thing that makes Taika's films unique. I want to play a clip here from John Cleese because I think it really captures a philosophy at the heart of Taika's work.
This attitude seems to me to stem from a very basic misunderstanding of the difference between serious and solemn. A group of us could be sitting around after dinner discussing matters that were extremely serious, like the education of our children or our marriages, and we could be laughing, and that would not make what we were discussing one bit less serious. Solemnity, on the other hand, I mean, I don't know what it's for. The two most beautiful memorial services that I've ever attended both had a lot of humor, and it somehow freed us all. But solemnity, it serves pomposity, and the self-important always know at some level of their consciousness that their egotism is going to be punctured by humor. That's why they see it as a threat.
This distinction of something being serious but not solemn is so important to comedy and creativity. Just because something is being dealt with in a comedic fashion doesn't make it any less serious. Eagle vs. Shark is about mental illness. Boy is about rural poverty and child neglect. What We Do in the Shadows looks at inclusion and discrimination. Hunt for the Wilderpeople is a commentary on the child welfare system. All of these issues are serious, but are Taika's movies about them solemn? Let's ask that question another way. All of these films are funny, but would you describe them as comedies?
I don't think you can ever say my films are straight up comedies, because my films are comedies with lots of slow bits where there's no laughs.
Now, I have to point out the obvious here. It is crucial that serious issues are still treated with respect, even if they are not treated solemnly. There is a difference between being light-hearted about a serious issue and exploiting that issue for humour. Take this scene in Hunt for the Wilderpeople, where Ricky Baker is talking about his friend in the child welfare system who was killed. The scene focuses on the characters and doesn't try to find a joke, because there isn't one. Taika is not afraid to sacrifice an opportunity for humour if it means giving the characters and issues the respect they deserve. So while Taika's films are funny, the humour doesn't come directly from the deeper thematic topic. Rather, this issue forms the backdrop of the story and the world the characters inhabit, and the humour comes from the situations they find themselves in. Childhood is the central theme of almost all of Taika's films. This is not an accident. In fact, it's at the heart of how he approaches creative work.
For me, is what being creative is about. Is having fun and looking at life through like a sort of the lens of a child, really.
The idea of like seeing this world that shitty grown-ups are creating through the lens of someone who's more innocent.
I think this simple concept is the reason Taika can use his films to talk about such complex and deep issues, while balancing them with humour and lightheartedness. By looking at issues with the innocence of a child, the text often doesn't need to be explicit about the issue being addressed, because we, the audience, understand what is happening. There will be some spoilers here, so if you haven't seen Jojo Rabbit, then stop this video right now and go watch it. It's one of the best films of the decade and showcases everything about what makes Taika's work unique. If you have seen it but need a reminder, Taika sums up the plot pretty well.
It's about a little boy growing up in World War II. He wants to be the best Nazi he can, and he finds out that his mother's hiding a girl in his attic.
So Jojo Rabbit takes Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, one of the most serious issues there is, but does not deal with it in a solemn fashion like, say, Schindler's List. How does it do this? After all, even though this period of history has featured in literally hundreds of films, it hardly ever forms the backdrop of what you could describe as a comedy. Well, this is why the childhood lens Taika applies to his films is so important. Because Jojo is a child, he has never seen the reality of the Third Reich. Jojo has no idea what the Nazis are doing, and so we, the audience, also never explicitly see this for much of the film. But in Jojo's mother, for example, we can see glimpses of the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. The film is telling us through the adults that it knows what is happening in the real world, even if Jojo does not. The film is reminding us that the world characters like Rosie and Elsa live in is very different to Jojo's. The first time these worlds collide is the scene with Stephen Merchant's SS officer raiding Jojo's home.
Heil Hitler.
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 It's one of the funniest scenes of the movie, but that doesn't undermine the fact that we, the audience, know the true implications of what will happen if he finds Elsa. This doesn't need to be made explicit for the scene to maintain tension, despite the humour. Meanwhile, Jojo is finally starting to learn what his ideology means in the real world. This is where the darker side of Taika's films becomes clear. Although his movies can confront more serious themes in a light-hearted manner through the innocence of a child, eventually the real world catches up to them. And when it does, we feel the loss of innocence in the same way the character does. And it's often the most powerful moment of the film. Taika's movies are about finding the comedy in the darkness. By introducing us to distinct characters and juxtaposing the absurd with the mundane, his stories can deal with serious issues without the movies ever getting too solemn. He reminds us to see the world like he does, through the eyes of a child. I'm so glad his work has become more mainstream, and that he is using both his art and his personal profile to shine a spotlight on the issues that matter. After The Mandalorian, I'm so excited to see what he does with Star Wars, but I'm even more excited by his next personal screenplay, which is about the 2014 American Samoa football team. I honestly think it's going to be the next Cool Runnings, and I cannot wait. Taika is an inspiration, and his work is a reminder to us all to take a step back, have fun, and laugh a little more. Yes, there is darkness in our world, like there is darkness in his stories, but there is also light and laughter. You just have to look for it.
You know, sometimes in life, it seems like there's no way out. Like a sheep trapped in a maze designed by wolves.
Hey, a huge thanks to all of you who have supported the channel for its first 3 videos. Seriously, it means so much to me that you're enjoying these essays and have engaged with the channel. Creative content is only viable because of people like you who are prepared to show your support, so thank you again so much. If you want to see more essays like this one or the others on the channel, then click all the buttons to let me know you liked it. Thanks for watching.